All right, let's just dive right in. We're about to journey into what is, no joke, one of the most nightmarish narrative labyrinths ever created. And I'm not just talking about the brutal fights or the wild magic. Nope. We are tackling a timeline that feels like it was fundamentally designed to break your brain.
So, what's the real difference between a series that has a few spin-offs and a series that is a genuine chronological disaster? Well, the Fate franchise isn't just a story. It's a multiverse of madness where history, myth, and a bunch of conflicting canons just collide. You see, most people look at the watch order and see a list, but when you really look at it, it's a trap.
And there's a huge difference here. A dangerous watch order. It might spoil a big twist or a character's fate. But a nightmare watch order? Oh, that's different. That's one where the very rules of cause and effect are twisted specifically to make you suffer, where the emotional gut punch of one story is completely ruined if you watch things in the wrong sequence.
So today, we're basically speed-running the chaos. We're cutting through all the noise to give you the one single definitive path through the Holy Grail War. Because honestly, the final question isn't just, what do I watch? It's more like, can your sanity even handle the answer?
To do that, we're going to break this down into 3 parts. First, we'll cover the engine of suffering, that's the lore basics. Then, we'll hit the 0 point and figure out the absolute best place to start. And finally, we'll navigate the Stay Night Trinity, the main timeline itself.
So, before we can even think about mapping out the path, you have to understand the terrain. This is the foundation for all the pain and confusion that's about to come.
At the absolute center of this entire mess is something called the Holy Grail War. The premise sounds simple. 7 mages summon 7 legendary heroes from across history to fight to the death. The winner gets a cup that grants any wish. Simple, right? Wrong. So wrong. And the real source of all this chronological chaos? It's right here. The original story wasn't a normal book, it was a visual novel. And that means it didn't have one story. It had 3 totally separate routes or branching paths.
Now, think of these like parallel universes. They all start at the exact same moment, but they spiral into wildly different nightmares based on the choices the main character makes. You've got the Fate route, which is kind of the baseline. We're setting that one aside for this guide, since it doesn't really have a modern anime. Then there's Unlimited Blade Works, this big clash of ideals. And then you have Heaven's Feel, which, that's just a straight-up horror story.
And this is the part you absolutely have to get. These are not sequels to each other. They're alternate realities, where the suffering just gets passed around to different characters depending on the timeline you're in. So to really get the full picture, you can't just pick one. You have to witness the tragedy from every single painful angle. Okay, so that brings us to the biggest, and I mean the biggest, argument among fans. Where in the world do you actually begin? Well, for this survival guide, the answer is simple. You start with the tragedy that kicked it all off. You start with Fate/0. Fate/0 is the prequel, but here's the kicker. It was written after the original story. It shows you the war that happened 10 years before everything else. And it's not a story about heroes. It's about amoral killers and mages engaging in cold, calculated annihilation. It's the story of the trauma that defines the next generation. This whole debate really boils down to 2 philosophies. You can skip it to preserve the mystery of the original story, or you can start with it to understand the pain. If you want to feel the visceral, heavy weight of the curse that's hanging over these characters' heads, you start here. It completely reframes the franchise, not as a hero's journey, but as the direct fallout of a catastrophe. So, for this speed run, we're making the call. Fate/0 is your entry point. Why? Because it breaks you in properly. It teaches you right from the get-go that in this world, ideals are just pretty words you write on tombstones.
All right, you survived the prequel. Now it's time for the main event, Fate/Stay Night. You're moving to the present day, but just remember, this is where the timeline shatters into pieces, so the order you watch them in is absolutely everything.
First up, you're going to watch Unlimited Blade Works. And I mean specifically the TV series from the Studio Ufotable, not that old movie. This route is all about the ideology of heroism. It's flashy, it's intense, but it's really the shonen layer of this whole nightmare. And it all boils down to one brutal question. And that question is this. If you knew, without a single doubt, that your dream of becoming a hero would lead to nothing but your own destruction and endless suffering, would you still chase it? After that, you descend. You go from that TV series to the Heaven's Feel movie trilogy. And this is the point where the franchise just stops pretending it's about heroes. It becomes a story about victims. It takes the same people you just got to know and throws them into an absolute meat grinder of psychological trauma and body horror.
This right here is why the order is so crucial. Unlimited Blade Works is about the ideal of saving the world. Heaven's Feel is about saving one single person while the rest of the world burns to the ground. It is the darkest, most raw version of this story. And if you watch it out of order, the impact is just gone. You need the hope from the last route to truly, deeply feel the despair of this one.
So, let's lay it all out one last time. The definitive path. You start with Fate Zero to get the tragic context. Then you move to Unlimited Blade Works to explore the clash of ideals. And you finish with Heaven's Feel to get slapped in the face with the brutal reality.
So there you have it. The map is laid out. You have the guide to navigate this timeline in a way that maximizes the emotional devastation, just like it was meant to be. Now that you have the map through the nightmare, the only question left is, which tragedy is going to break you first?